This week's parsha is Parshat Shmini. We're finally back into the parsha. This Dvar Torah is based on Dvar Torah I heard from Rav Bernstein a couple of years ago in Machon Yaakov, but it's also in a sefer Dvar Mikra for Parshat Shmini. It's Geshmak. I really wanted to share it with you. It's a bit involved, but it's well worth it. Okay, so Vayib Yom HaShmini. So what's this 8th day? The 8th day is, Rashi tells us, is Shukam HaMishkan Bo Bayom. Right, so on that day, on that 8th day, whatever that means, is the day that the Mishkan was put into use finally. So a few psukim later, in chapter 9, verse 3, Vel bnei Israel tedaber lemor chu sir izim lachatat ve'egel v'cheves bnei shanat mimim lola. So what does that mean? It means, and the children of Israel speak as follows: take a he-goat for a sin offering, that's one sacrifice, and a calf and a sheep in their first year unblemished for an elevation offering. So here we have a sir izim, the goat. We have a calf and we have a sheep. That's 3 offerings. Says the Torah's Kohanim. So Amar Lahem, Moshe Israel. So Moshe said to the Jews, Atem yesh biyedchem betchila, yesh biyedchem besof. You have something in your hands at the beginning. You have something in your hands at the end. Yesh biyedchem betchila. What's that? Vishchatu sir izim. That's quoting Bereshit. That is to say, that's when the brothers sold Yosef, and then after they sold Yosef, they needed to cover it all up. So they slaughtered a goat, and they dunked his coat in its blood, and they showed it to their father. So that's what the Midrash is quoting. What? V'yesh b'yedchem basof. You have in your hands at the end. Asulahem egel masecha. They made for themselves an egel masecha. Right? They made for themselves a golden calf. That's the sin of the golden calf recorded in the Torah. So yavo sir izim ve'chaper al masa izim. So now we're bringing a he-goat to mechaper, to atone for the sin with the goat. Yavo egel ve'chaper al masa egel. And the egel should come, the calf should come to be mechaper, to atone for the sin of the calf. And that's the Torah's Kohanim. So there are a slew of kashas, of difficulties with this Torah's Kohanim. After all, well, what does this mean? We know that the whole point of the Mishkan, of using the Mishkan, of putting the Mishkan into effect, was to be mechaper, to atone for the sin of the golden calf. What on earth does the sin of the Mechirat Yosef have to do with this? What does the sale of Joseph have anything to do with the Mishkan? That's odd. And moreover, why does it say Yesh Beitchem Betchila, Yesh Beitchem Besof? Why specifically the beginning and the end? Why doesn't it just say, the first thing you did was this, the second thing you did this, or at first you did this and then later on you did this? Here it seems like it's really, they're connected almost. It's like this was the beginning of the sin, and then the end of the sin, like the culmination of the sin, was the sin of the golden calf. What does the Midrash say anything? What's the connection here? So those are a couple of questions. But we have more. Fine, let's just say we're talking about the sale of Yosef. Fine, so that was a terrible sin. Agreed. But at the end of the day, the he-goat was almost like an afterthought. It was like an epilogue to the entire episode. Okay, so they sold Joseph. That was terrible. And then they needed to find a way to present this to their father. So they dunked Yosef's coat into blood, and they showed it to their father. That's like a very peripheral point when it comes to the sale of Yosef. That was bad, but it wasn't nearly as bad as selling your brother into slavery. So what's going on? These are some of the questions that we need to deal with from this Midrash. Okay? But those are only 2 of the sacrifices. So we have the goat, and we have the calf. What about the sheep? So the sheep is discussed in the Targum Yonatan ben Uziah, who explained it as follows. It was in order, Yitzchak Avinu. It was in order to arouse the merit of Yitzchak Avinu. Now, that requires a bit of thought, because, look, Yitzchak Avinu is Yitzchak Avinu, but, if we're already going with the Avos, then why not use the other Avos, or all of the Avos, or some other Av? Why specifically Yitzchak? And this question gets enunciated because there seems to be another reference to Yitzchak when it comes to the Mishkan. That is to say, the Mishkan, as is said in the Psikta, the Mishkan was actually prepared as of Kafei Kislev, which happens to be Hanukkah. That's the merit of the fact that the Jews were patient with this until Nisan, which is 3 months. They say it's part of the reward of Hanukkah. But the point is, the Mishkan was ready in Kafei Kislev. We waited 3 months to begin the service of the Mishkan. That is a long time. Why did we wait so long? So the answer is because Yitzchak was actually born in Nisan, and as such, God wanted to inaugurate the Mishkan in Nisan when Yitzchak was born. Now again, that just highlights again the question: why specifically Yitzchak? Why are we honing in specifically on Yitzchak Avinu? Why not the other Avos? Why not wait too? At the end of the day, there's Tishrei. Tishrei has two of the Avos. Avraham and Yaakov were born in Tishrei. So when we wait even longer, now that might be too long, but the point is there seems to be a specific reference to Yitzchak. Why? Those are some more questions to deal with when it comes to this Torah Kohanim and this whole episode of these korbanot. So, the way we need to understand is as follows. Says Rav Bernstein that what was the sin of the golden calf? A lot of people, there's a bit of a misconception here, that people think that the sin of the golden calf was a sin of idolatry. It was avodah zarah. We used the golden calf to worship the golden calf as God. And that's actually not true. Even from the pshat of the Torah, what happened? So the Jewish people were waiting for Moshe. Moshe said he was going to go up for 40 days and then come down. It was the 40th day, according to their calculation, which was wrong. But obviously, but it had been 40 days and Moshe didn't come up. Or come down, I should say. And the Jewish people started to get nervous. So they went to Aaron. And what did they say? They said, Kum aseh lanu Elohim. Rise up, make for us a God. Now, Elohim also has this other connotation of like of a judge or perhaps even an emissary. The point is, when the Jewish people came to make the golden calf, it wasn't as a replacement for God. It was as a replacement for Moshe. They weren't having an intermediary to connect with God in the same way that Moshe was their intermediary to connect from God to them. And that was a terrible mistake. Now why? Because in the absence of, when Moshe is absent, who's in charge? Aaron. So that's what the Jewish people have done. So Moshe isn't coming back and they're confused. If you're so confused, go to Aaron and ask him, what do we do? Instead, the Jewish people went to Aaron, and instead of asking him what they should do and being told what to do, they said, Aaron, this is what we are telling you to do. And that was totally wrong, because there's emphasis on needing to be able to listen to the Zaken in your times, and the Jewish people want to have none of that. We're going to tell the Zaken what to do, and the Zaken isn't not going to tell us what to do. And we see this element specifically in reference to Yitzchak Avinu. That's why we need to be me'orer the schut of Yitzchak Avinu. Because at the end of the day, the Chasam Sofer asks a question on Rosh Hashanah. Why? I mean, there's a constant reference to Akedat Yitzchak, but he has a big question. Why specifically are we talking about Akedat Yitzchak? Why are we constantly crediting Yitzchak with this trial? At the end of the day, it was also a huge trial in Nisayon for Avram Avinu. At the end, because we know that God prophesied that he'd have a son. The son would inherit him spiritually, physically. Like all of his hopes and dreams were manifest in Yitzchak. God was categorically opposed to the idea of human sacrifice. And yet, here God says, he's telling Avram, you have to sacrifice your son. So what happened to Avram? Why don't we reference the miracle with him, or the merit of Avram here? And Rav Bernstein points out something beautiful. I believe this is coming from the Chasam Sofer. That's because, there are two ways. At the end of the day, it was difficult for Yitzchak because he was the one who was giving up his life. But for Yitzchak, the trial was infinitely more difficult for Abraham. Now why? How did Abraham know he was supposed to do this? He had been told by God. How did Yitzchak know that he was supposed to do this? He had been told by Abraham. You cannot compare Abraham, who knew. Like, look, as difficult as impossible it might be, he was told by God. He knew. It was clear to him. So fine. Yitzchak, though, had to have absolute trust in Abraham. Are you sure you heard correctly? The stakes here are super high. And yet even so, Yitzchak went without a question. His trust was total and absolute in Abraham, the Zaken Ador, and he went unquestioningly. And for that, we arouse the merit of Yitzchak. And that counters exactly what the sin of Bnei Israel was when it came to the Egel. Because with the Egel, they shouldn't have gone to tell Aaron what to do. They should have gone and asked Aaron what they should do. They should ask Aaron to tell them what to do. And that's not what they did. So Yitzchak comes and he counters that. Fine. Well, how about the Sir Izim? What does that have to do with it? That's because it's beautiful. So what happened there? At the end of the day, the Shvatim, right, the brothers, they did. I mean, we need to say this with trepidation because people have a tendency to kind of see the earlier generations as they're like us. They don't have any particular spiritual greatness. They're weak like us and human like us. And that's not the correct way to see it, because really there were justifications. Here too, that the Mefarshim deal with, that first, Yosef was Mord of a Malchut. He rebelled against the king. Kingship belonged to Yehuda, And Yosef was talking about how he wanted to rule over them. So treason, by the way, is still punishable by death, I think, in every country, if not in most countries. The point is, this is a long-standing doctrine that if you commit treason against the government or against the king, you're liable to the death penalty. So that's exactly what Yosef was doing. So that's one explanation. A second explanation is he was a rodef. That is to say, in previous generations, we had Yaakov and then we had Esav. And Esav was constantly trying to kill Yaakov. With Yitzchak, a generation earlier, we had Yishmael. And Yishmael too was also always trying to kill Yitzchak. And so suddenly we have this another brother situation where Yosef suddenly is asserting his power over the other brothers. And so the brothers got nervous and they thought there was a situation of rodef, and therefore they took matters into their own hands. But there's a big question here. Why don't they go speak to Yaakov? Go speak to the Zaken Ador. Go speak to Yaakov. And if you're going to say, no, Yaakov Avinu was too biased, he was too close to Yosef, he clearly favored him. But the brothers were also biased. At the end of the day, okay, so it's true, Yaakov is Yosef's father, but the brothers were Yosef's brothers. So you can't say that one is more biased than the other. They should have gone to ask, and they didn't. And the way this is emblemized, this is highlighted, is the fact that they went and they dunked Yosef's kutonet pasim into the blood of the seir izim, of the he-goat. Because not only did they not consult with Yaakov Avinu, but they actively tried to hide it from him. And that was terrible. And that, by the way, is perfect because at the end of the day, we see that what is this reference in Torah Kohanim to with the seir izim? It was vishchatu seir izim. That is, right? Vishchatu seir izim. That is something with Yosef, but it's not focusing on Mechirat Yosef. The sin there was not the sin against Yosef. They'd already sold Yosef. That sin was already over. The sin of dunking the keton pasim into the goat's blood was a sin against Yaakov Avinu. And that's why we have this. Because at the end of the day, at the beginning, so what's the tchila? The tchila was that as great as they were, at their enormously elevated level, the Shvatim made a mistake. But they made a mistake without consulting the Zaken Ador, and at their extremely high spiritual sensitivity, the small gap that there was there, that over the generations, when we went to smaller people that came out of Egypt, that turned into a massive gulf, and that led to them not consulting Aaron, and at the end of the day, forming the Egel Masecha. So there you have it. Dvar Mikra from Rav Bernstein, and Shabbat Shalom.